Howdy folks, welcome to the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen Jeffrey Francis Scannell. Today's date is March 26, 2018. This is show number 83, Overfishing and Me. So I just wanted to give you a little overview of my life as a fisherman and what I know about this topic. So when I was a kid, as I was mentioning earlier today to somebody, I knew a guy named Louis Pina, and Louis had come to this country from Cape Verde in the year 1900, and he was 15 years old. So when I was very young, he died in his late 90s, and he was a tough guy. He rode his bike to work, mowing lawns, at the age of 95. So he was a fisherman. He told me all kinds of stories when I was a little kid. And I first met him, he was watering down some of the nets down at Pogie's shanty, down at his shack there, which was an operation for the weirs, the trap fishing. So Louis was putting water on the nets, and he squirted me a little bit. I think I was 8 or 10. Okay, and I squealed a little bit, hey, and then Louis had a good sense of humor. He said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, put on his sad face, and he was kind of laughing at the same time. And I felt a little embarrassed, of course, and I thought it was kind of funny. So that was when I first met Louis. I was a little kid, and he worked down there. But he was instrumental in my life, understanding at a young age about the ocean and fishing and gardening. Louis had a big garden. We had a big garden, so we would talk about gardening and fishing quite a bit. Just, it was like awesome. I had some other mentors too that I mentioned. So I want to get into herring because my brother Dave instructed me, because he was in college, to put the herring over the dam. Don't take any herring. For some reason they had dried up all of a sudden, and I know why. It was because of the offshore. People were saying, oh, it's the spraying, but it wasn't. It was offshore boats were catching them. See, the equipment back then was improving so quickly. The electronics, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like ridiculous. And hello? Hello? Huh? Yeah, I can't talk right now. It is though. Okay, alrighty, bye. Wow, that was a call for Love Power Grid Consortium. Sorry. Anyway, back to the overfishing. The herring. We lived right on a herring run at 706 Main Street across from Brack's. It was a beautiful little spot to grow up. Now, when I was a little kid, we would catch the herring there, and we'd catch the herring at the reservoir, and we'd go over to Brewster. They didn't mind. We'd catch the herring there. And sometimes we'd go up to another herring run that led up into Long Pond, great Pleasant Lake area up in there. So we had a few places we went to. We'd catch the herring, and my brothers and I would work and get the roe out, and then we'd sell the roe, and Mom loved the roe, so she had it in the freezer. And we tried pickling it, and we did that a little bit, not much. But we would mainly use it to put under the corn. And it really, really made the corn vibrant. So I was very angry about the herring drying up. And I knew it wasn't the spraying, because I lived right there at the bogs, and it wasn't the spraying, So it was the overfishing that got the herring. So things like herring, are called a bait fish. Menhaden, which kind of look a little bit like a herring. That's a bait fish. Squid. Okay, mackerel. These are all the bait fish. These are things that whales eat. And these are things that the striped bass eat, etc., etc. So when I advocate for shutting down, let's say, an 80% shutdown, meaning we're going to take 80% less herring, 80% less this and that. But aggregate poundage-wise, I would say taking less would be a good idea. And I have a book here too. So it just calls to mind, and this is an old book. It's a textbook. What year is this? I forget to go and see what year it was. It's an older book. Okay, here we are. I have to make it difficult. So imagine this is about 20 years old. 2002. So it's about 20 years old, this stuff. So I just want to run a few things by you from this old textbook here. It says here, the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service estimates that 45% of the fish stocks whose status is known are now overfished. So many fish have been harvested that there is not enough breeding stock. My palsy, pardon me. Not enough breeding stock left to replenish the species. Recent trends are seen, even when faced with evidence of overfishing, and this is what gets me here, the fishing industry. Okay, now we're talking about the fishing industry. Previously, they were talking about the National Marine Fisheries Service, ostensibly in charge of managing the fishery. But when they say the fishery, I think they mean these people do whatever they want to do. That's what they do. Okay. Even when faced with evidence of overfishing, the fishing industry seldom follows a rational course. I would disagree. If you've got a mortgage to pay, you're going to squawk. You're going to say, I got to catch these fish. I got to. You're going to be squawking like crazy, and politicians are going to go, oh, like that, and they're going to jump in for you, which is the problem, basically. So the industry's dominant motivating force, it says here, is quick financial return, even if it means depleting a stock. Who's in charge here? The fishermen? I guess so. Even if it means depleting a stock and disrupting the equilibrium of a fragile ecosystem. Long-term stability is forsaken for short-term profit. So they go from the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service to what the fishermen are doing, and there's a disconnect there between who's the boss here. It seems like the fisherman is the boss, but the first thing they do right out of the gate is they give mention to the National Marine Fisheries Service. As an aside, they manage the fishery, but really, there is no management of any import. So, and it goes into buy-kill and commercial extinction, and, this is an older book. So we have been at it. This, as I've said, this decline that we're still in, we've been at this for decades. And I think I told a story about my mother, I wouldn't say cussing out Al Payne down at the store, down right there at the river where Harwich is talking about putting the snack shack. Actually, it's more like me talking about putting a snack shack where the maintenance building is. And I was thinking, Why are we going to get all these people up into our business right down in the center of like the marina when we can keep them outside right on 28, keep them out there. Let them walk in and go to a platform and eat their hot dog. That's what I would think. And then, of course, if you're combining the Marine Technologies Educational Program with the Snack Shack or the Footlong Shanty, well, then you need a little bit more space because you'll use that for, you know, a little bit of gear work. The kids will be doing some gear work, artificial reefs, this and that, and a lot of different things. They'll be working and busy, either making the hot dogs and the fried clams, just like up in P-Town. John's Footlong, a famous footlong hot dog stand. Anyway, overfishing. Look at Provincetown now. Now, if you looked at it back when I was a little boy, you would see trucks coming out of there. Truckloads coming out of there. Now, even before that, over in Truro, I guess there were these, there was a freezer plant, etc., and they would bring buckets and buckets of fish from the boats on a cable system that came ashore. And my friend Tracy Tarvers showed me all about that, and she was pretty upset when they pulled that thing out, because that was a piece of history, fishing history. Now, there used to be a lot more fish in the ocean. Okay, let me just tell you a little story, overfishing and me. When I would read about this as a kid, I read that the boats would load up with a full load of fish back in the 20s and the 30s. And then they would steam. That means they'd get into port, they'd steam to port, and they would check on the price. That's what they do. And if they were going to get a penny a pound, thanks anyway. See you later. And they'd go right back out, and they would try the market again. So they'd dump a whole boatload of fish, a big, probably 30 or 40,000 pounds of fish, beautiful fish. They'd go dump that fish that probably wasn't too hard to catch. Now, well, it definitely wasn't too hard to catch back then. And back earlier than that, let's say Clinton Andrews wrote a book about commercial fishing in the earliest days, let's say 1914 on Nantucket, with a small boat, towing a small net. You'd have to be very, very careful not to overload the net with fish. And you bring the net up, and you didn't want to overload it with fish. That was a key, because you couldn't haul it on board and dump it. You'd have to split the net, you know, outside the boat, and then dump some of the fish outside the boat, and then you'd have to sew the net back up again. So that was a no-no. Don't catch too many fish. It wasn't a problem catching the fish. It was the price. That was the issue. So that was over 100 years ago when powerboats started dragging, and there was a lot of fish, and the price was the issue. It wasn't a matter of catching the fish at all. So, anyway, Jacques Cousteau's another one who kind of had an influence on me. And he had an influence on a lot of people. Here's Cape Cod Times, March 26th, today's paper. And this is the AmeriCorps gang out there clearing the runs, the herring runs. Top officials from the Harwich Natural Resources Department and 13 members of AmeriCorps, God bless them, Cape Cod, walked the Herring River from Hinckley's Pond on Friday, clearing the channel. The annual clearing takes place in March. I've never been on this. I would have enjoyed that in my younger day. The annual clearing takes place in March to make way for the running of the herring in the next several weeks. The group is set to walk the Skinnequit River from Skinnequit Pond to the marsh area today. And then it shows the left AmeriCorps Cape Cod members, Alex Bates and Caitlin R-A-S-C-H-E, Rashi, I'm not sure, move a large branch that fell into the river. God bless the AmeriCorps for helping out the Cape with the herring runs. Now, I did do a show about aquaculture and the herring runs, but overfishing is what I protested to the National Marine Fisheries Service when the day they were getting together and giving these offshore boats, these pair trawl boats, the for free fishing rights in perpetuity, for free, to catch the herring offshore. I was opposing that and instead putting forth my system called the market quota system. So, you know, who is this character talking about, you know, the herring runs on Cape Cod? That wasn't on their radar. That didn't interest them. Didn't. So finally now we find out, and for years I was complaining, and people of some stature were saying, no, you're ignorant, you don't know. No, these boats are not catching the river herring. You're wrong. Now they're saying, of course, I'm right. And I think we all knew that. The offshore boats are catching these herring. These are the foundational species, the herring, the menhaden, the squid, the mackerel. If we leave these alone and we leave some of the other fish alone, and we put biomass tonnage into the waters, and that biomass tonnage, let's say leaf litter, things like that, branches, lawn clippings, organics, that will translate into algae, krill, et cetera, et cetera. That will translate into these bait fish and a lot of other things that live in the ocean. That will then translate into mushrooming, the cod, the lobster, the flounder, the things we will pay good money at the fish market. And, you know, Star Market, Stop and Shop. We'll pay good money for the seafood, but a lot less money we'll have to pay if we play our cards right and we shut down the fishery. So I've had a whole lifetime of following this issue of overfishing. And before me, there were people that could account for all the declines through their whole life. Let's say Louis Pina, from the time of 1900, when his first job was on a coastal whaling boat, until when he died when I was a youngster, when I was in my 20s, and I'm born in 57. There were declines basically all through that period, with probably a couple of blips for World War II or World War I or some disturbance of fishing boats being able to work. So what declined was not just the fish populations, but also the habitat. You have to understand the habitat carries the stocks, and they're kind of one and the same. So scalloping, there was a lot of, let's say, offshore. I could see that the scallop dredges did quite a bit of damage, and so that gave me the enthusiasm to design a better scallop dredge years ago. So I came up with the kinder, gentler scallop dredge, which is on another show. And all that has is, instead of the chain bags, it's got chafing gear that glides over the bottom. And I mentioned back then on that show, when I first threw my dredges over, this is bay scalloping on Nantucket, I put the throttle down and the boat nearly took off running like crazy, and I had to throttle way back because to tow the chain bags over the bottom took a lot of horsepower, but to tow these kinder, gentler dredges over the bottom took much less horsepower. So I used those dredges for a number of years too. I had to perfect them, so that's why I used them. In some ways they weren't as good, but in some ways they were much better. Now, as I was trained by the old-timers on Nantucket to fish, they didn't like over-towing on the bottom because you don't want to wreck your eelgrass, and you wreck the seed and wreck everything. So the old-timers would appreciate, let's say, not overdoing it. You know, you make a certain amount of distance and your dredges fill up a certain amount and you haul back, and so you're not hauling back a dredge that's, you know, heavier than yourself, you know, 300 or 400 pounds perhaps, just packed full. Well, that if it's packed full like that, it's all dragging all over the bottom, and it's just unnecessary to do that kind of damage. So there's resentment if you talk about that kind of thing, by the way. You don't get this. You're just the public, right? You don't get how fishermen can be so territorial and so resentful. Because if you're talking about a better dredge, that doesn't go. And so that's a problem, you know. You discuss better fishing gear, green fishing gear, big problem. Gets personal, like you're attacking somebody. So overfishing is a personal attack by me against another fisherman. That's basically the fact of it right there. It shouldn't be like that. These fisheries managers should be getting right in there. They should actually be doing some fishing. And I guess maybe it's too good to get out there and go fishing and at least get into it a little bit. But that should be, if a harbor master is going to be a fishery manager of some kind for a small town, then I think you got to get the guy or the gal, you got to get them out there on occasion and actually do some fishing. Now, dragon, something kind of made me sick way back in the 90s when there were no codfish. We were catching some huge whale cod that were so fat with spawn. I've never seen anything like it in my life. You know, and to gut them all full of spawn like that, all red roe, beautiful, big, huge, fat fish, codfish. And at that point in time, there were very, very few codfish. And so, you know, the limited entry didn't work. I mean, this has been proven not to work, this limited entry. Oh, we're going to give certain few fishermen permits, and then they will take care of the ocean because, geez, it's up to them. And so, I mean, they must understand. They do understand. They think they understand. No, I'm trying to tell you, it doesn't work like that. People understand their own balance sheet. So if overfishing is what it takes for your balance sheet, then that's what it takes for your balance sheet. So the public resource management end of it is my end of it, even though I've got a lot of fishing experience, mostly in my younger days, not recently. But I was fishing the day the cops came and pulled me out of my house years ago. What was that, 1999 or 2000? I think it was maybe 1999. I'm not sure. Anyway, overfishing and me. So very important is the fact that when these textbooks are talking about you're fishing down the resource to the point where your whatever it is can't reproduce. Okay, who's running the show here? It's not the National Marine Fisheries Service. They don't run it. They don't manage it. It's the politicians that are doing the managing along with the fishermen. who cry, and then they get what they want. They're like kids in a candy store, I've always said this, who are crying and they get what they want. The bad mother, which is the National Marine Fisheries Service, gives up and says, okay. Of course, they would get fired. They're just bureaucrats. They're really not in charge. If you had good people in charge, none of this would be going on. But it's the politicians that go in a room with the fishermen. And I think that's a fact of the matter, that the so-called fisheries managers kind of get dictated to. They get told what to do. Let's see. It's frustrating for me because I have a system on the table called the market quota system, but you might think of it as pick your own strawberries. So that's important that we understand that the fisheries management systems are broken, and we may not have time to fix it. It may be that different factors are going to add up to the crashing of these marine environments, which they talk about. I think they're talking about that in the textbook, which is 20 years old. We're really begging for it. We really need a shutdown of these fisheries. And we can work to perfect our fishery systems while we are shutting down. And that's where I come in. I've designed a lot of things that we need. So I hope you're listening. And I hope you don't buy this tripe about me being mentally ill, because I'm not. You know, I get in a fight with these people about fisheries management issues such as the pond issue on Nantucket. And I think the rich people are really at fault for trying to buy the government. And this is what we get. Okay, they can afford the seafood, right? What do they care? All right, that's the Scannell Agenda. Thanks for watching.